I am Ankwetta. I am a very proud African woman. For a very long time, our stories have been told on behalf of us. Someone else has told us our story, and we have found ourselves fighting so hard to fit into the stories that someone told us about us.
We are actually shortchanging the entire humanity as Africans, because if we say humanity was born in Africa and it has remained in Africa for several thousands of years before it could migrate from here to other parts of the world, it would be impossible to think that these people, for several thousands of years, they couldn't figure out things.
Africa was invaded. So they tell us they discover Africa. That is their language. Let's understand their language. They discover. That doesn't mean it wasn't existing.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us in today's episode of the Obehi Podcast, where we talk a lot about storytelling, how to own your story, and how to stand out in the competition using your superpower. You see, your story is your superpower, because by the time you own your story, you never need to compete with any person, because no two people are exactly the same in this world. This is why we are always encouraging people in businesses, but also people in the professional life, to own their story and to use it for themselves, to differentiate themselves in what they are doing. So I have the honor of talking with a sister today, Ankwetta, who is joining me all the way from Satome. Of course, she has a very deep story of what she has been doing. She has traveled different parts of the world. Of course, she is a very great personality in what she does, in what she believes in. So she's going to be explaining to us today why she's doing what she is doing. So dear Ankwetta, thank you so much for being here. And please tell the people who you are.
Well, thank you so much, my brother, for inviting me, Obehi. It's a pleasure to join you on this podcast today. So I am Ankwetta. I am a very proud African woman, and it's been a long journey to me being a proud African woman. So I'm a mom, I'm a serial author. I have lived in different parts of the world. And what I'm passionate about right now, it's unlocking our stories as Africans, because for a very long time our stories have been told on behalf of us. Someone else has told us our story, and we have found ourselves fighting so hard to fit into the stories that someone told us about us. Someone has shaped us. So now is the time when we're remembering. Africa is remembering. And remembering means that we go back, we give ourselves the permission to go back to who we were before we were invaded, before we were interrupted, before we were taught to be who we think we should be. So that is what I'm passionate about right now. And that includes writing books, it includes creating content, it includes having conversations like this one.
Thank you so much for that, sister. You see, some people might not understand the enormity of that your story is written by somebody else, and you are basically just reciting the script of somebody else, and therefore you are living a reality that is not even yours. And this is something that should be obvious if you are looking around you. If you are in Africa, you see that the book that you are reading, they are not telling you about yourself. I remember in 2010, I wrote a book that I titled Underdevelopment in Africa, My Hands Are Clean. Even though the thesis of that book was actually lay emphasis on the role of the African people in terms of where they are today and where they could be, of taking the right action to move to where they want to be. There was a point that I was also criticizing the European intervention in Africa, and this particular argument came up, and I was saying it makes no sense that in Ghana or in Nigeria, you are teaching the children about snow, because the children have no use for that. There is no snow in West Africa. Instead, I say we could replace the word snow with Harmattan, because in West Africa, we have Harmattan. The children can relate to Harmattan because they can feel it on their skin. They can feel it in the environment, instead of telling them about snow. Except, of course, which of course that is the case, we are preparing them to become product or to become employee in the West. And it makes sense now that at the end of the day, these children finish university, they're asking, what is the job? Because the job is not there, because they were never prepared for the African market. So, like Ankwetta is saying, we are just reciting the script of another person. And that is a very huge conversation that we are going to have today. All right, Ankwetta, let's start from the basis. We like to do that. Now, you are a much younger, let's say you are a young adolescent. We want to see what you are seeing around you. Tell us your background a little bit deeper. Please go.
A young adolescent, where I was born in Cameroon. That's where I grew up. And I went through a colonial system of education like everyone else in my generation before and even after. And even now, we're still going through that education system. And so that education system teaches you that you are not enough. The bare fact that we have to go to school and drop our languages and learn someone else's language, it's already the first evidence that tells you that you're not enough. Remember, communication, language is the tool of communication. It's what shapes us. So if we are speaking like we are doing now in someone else's language, we are not being authentic. We are not tapping into what is originally ours. We're not tapping into our technology, our intelligence as Africans, and given that Africa is the cradle of humankind, given that civilization started in Africa, which is, of course, the narrative that you get when you wake up, when you start remembering where we come from. This is not in textbooks. So when you start remembering, now I'm remembering. So you see me jumping from my adolescent to now, because I am in the mixture of that. I'm in the middle of unlearning all the things that I was taught when I was an adolescent. But to go back there, I was told that because the white man's language is the best language for me, my language is not good enough. So that shapes the way I show up. That shows the way I speak. That shapes the way I perceive the world. That shapes the way I then go into my adolescent life and walk into spaces, be it on the continent or abroad. It shapes my thinking, always thinking like greener pastures is abroad. So I have to go to Europe to be good. I have to gain European education and more certificates to be acknowledged. I need validation from a foreign country, from a foreign culture, in order to feel valued. So this was the adolescent me. This is how I grew up. And again, that reflects the results that we get. Because listen, my brother, when the way we tell our stories determine how the world perceives us, the way the world perceives us determine what we get, and what we get become our reality. So if what we get is the shadow of who we should be, what we should have, then you realize that we are living from a half cup. We are not living our fullest potential because we're constantly measuring ourselves from someone else's benchmark, from someone else's principles, someone else's values. And that someone else's intention is to keep us in a position of inferiority. So when we continue to live in this paradigm and seek validation in everything that is Western, we are fulfilling that prophecy. And we are completely stepping out of the authentic version of the greatness that we are by the bare fact that we have this melanin. Because, hey, this is technology. This is one of the oldest technology, and we must know that. So we get to know this when we start unlearning what we learned during our childhood and during those adolescent ages. You see me, I wear my hair natural. I praise myself for not ever having a wig, for never ever worn a wig. I don't even know, wig or whatever they call it.
Whatever. we get it.
But I have gone through pemming my hair. We all went through that. Every African woman, almost everyone went through it. But when you start remembering and you discover that this hair that stands, it should stand. It was not meant to be like this. It's a technology. It is a technology. It's an intelligence. So you embrace it with pride. And it takes some working. It takes a lot of inner work to go from that programming, that colonial programming of you are not good enough and everything about you is not, it's primitive, to actually recognizing that this is your greatness. This is the technology that your ancestors, that was seen in your ancestors before they were captured, before they were invaded, captured, and we were programmed the way we act today.
Thank you so much for that. It makes a lot of sense, Ankwetta. You see, It is really beautiful, the conversation about storytelling. Because by storytelling, we are using the whole of our brain now because we are imagining, remembering, we are formulating, we are projecting ourselves into the kind of future that we want to be. But of course, we also remember where we are coming from, which is why we actually start with this conversation. We usually start with this, that we want you to literally take us to where you were as a young adolescent, because all of us have been adolescent. Unfortunately, not everyone will become, and not everyone will live to an old age, but everyone will have been a child. So when we say, tell me about your childhood, everybody should know that I grew up as a child, but I'm no longer a child anymore. I hope that I will become an old man, maybe the oldest man in the world. I don't know. But at least the one that I know, I should start from there. Now, you see,
Just one moment before, just to add something to that.
yeah, come on.
When we get given the chance, the opportunity to grow into adulthood, we have a responsibility to rewrite our stories. We must not always stay in what we were told. We have a responsibility to question everything, question it, turn it over and over until you find the pattern, until you find the version that your body says, this is true, this is reality. So we don't wait for someone to do that for us because no one will do it. So we
That's
need
lovely.
to, just like we quit our children, our baby cot, our baby shoes, we quit kindergarten, we went to college, university, we should be able to let our minds graduate from who we were programmed to be as children, as adolescents, young adults, into the matured adults that we are becoming, to the greatness that we are becoming.
Absolutely. It just that sometimes somebody have been very clever in disconnecting us from that, so that it becomes pretty difficult for us to even make that connection. And I think that is also why this story today are important. Uh, somebody need to make. You don't even need to think very hard to demystify the idea that we didn't have all the bases that we needed to survive as human beings. Because if we didn't have, we are actually shortchanging the entire humanity as Africans. Because if we say humanity was born on Earth, humanity was born in Africa, and it has remained in Africa for several thousands of years before it could migrate from here to other parts of the world. It would be impossible to think that these people, for several thousands of years, they couldn't figure out things like names, like astronomy, like physics, like all these things that help us to excel in the world today. They were already here before they could move to any other place. That is why, for example, NASA only recently will be talking about the zero B, Ceres Bees, or whatever is the right name for it. Whether the people that don't go in West Africa have been exploring this for several years. That is why the Egyptian could build a pyramid. And again, let me remind somebody that is listening that in case you are thinking that the technology of the pyramid is solely in Egypt, you need to think again, because there are more pyramids in Nubia than in Egypt. It's just because the Europeans try to confuse people. Of course, the Egyptian pyramid are definitely powerful, but the same technology that was needed to build the pyramid in Giza is what is used to build the one in Nubia, in the land of Sudan. Because you couldn't say this one was advanced, the other one was not advanced. It is not possible. The only thing, what they are doing, because that is closer to them, they're trying to claim that to themselves. The other part doesn't make any sense. But only now that when you think as an African, you need to start looking east in the hinterland of Africa. You see that there are even pyramids in Nigeria. Now you start thinking, okay, but what about
The Great War of Zimbabwe. Look at the Great War of Zimbabwe.
What about the great ruins of Zimbabwe? What about the great wars of Benin? Because now all these things didn't need to filter into their understanding because they pretended they didn't know. You can't pretend that because Nubia and Kermit, they're in the same place. They just have border. It is not possible for you to just know these people and cannot know these people, even though it's just for you to literally walk into the other part. Or except maybe you are saying that all the civilizations in Africa were built by other people except African, then you must explain where are we coming from. Then you must explain it's very convoluted sometimes. And we don't also expect them to be able to tell us this story because it doesn't put them in the story. Because in the story that we're talking about now, they don't appear in it. Therefore, it makes it difficult for them to accept that kind of story, which is why it is our duty
Let
to
me
tell our
plug in right
story.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me plug in right there. You see, we just have to ask ourselves the question: Africa was invaded. So they tell us they discover Africa. That is their language. Let's understand their language. They discover. That doesn't mean it wasn't existing. It means they were living in oblivion until the moment when they discovered us. Okay, that's point number one. And if we were that primitive, the European wouldn't be here for that long. Now, because they discovered the technology that we had, number one, they knew they needed it. And if you do history, just go Google. Just let's take one example, famine. When you go Google famine, you find Wikipedia of famine. You will discover that the time that Europeans invaded Africa, they were starving. There was starvation in Europe. They had nothing. Why were they exploring the world? Because they were looking for something that they did not have. They were looking for something that will help them save their people. So they came to Africa. If Africa again was as primitive as they think they say it is, they wouldn't have destroyed our spirituality, our shrines, and taking the presences. I don't want to call them artifacts. Taking all the presences that we had in our shrines, which were the intelligence, our intelligence, they wouldn't have taken them to their museums. They're still there to today. And when we say return them, they fight us. They come up with all kinds of arguments. That's point number one. Destroying our spirituality because it was very powerful. Now, point number two, they took our people because they had that intelligence, they had that talent, they had that wisdom and knowledge, they had the cosmology. So they took them across the ocean to go build America, to go build Europe. Look at all the castles around Europe. When you do your research, you will understand that they will tell you it was built by the Moors. Who were the Moors? So Africans constructed the Western civilization at a time where they were almost perishing. They had nothing. In Europe, at the time that invaded Africa, when you read the books of some of their so-called missionaries and explorers, when you read those old scripts, they will tell you Africa was a land where no one was hungry. They had food everywhere, and they loved one another. They lived in harmony amongst one another. They did not fight and kill one another. We did not use weapons of mass destruction. Our ancestors lived and traded among themselves. Look at the great empire of Mali. Look at the empire of Sondiata. Look at great Zimbabwe. Look at the empire of Benin. When you look at all of those, they traded among one another and they did not use weapons to destroy one another. Did they have conflicts? Yes, they did. But because they lived in community, they knew how to resolve that. That's why we have a concept that is called the African palaver. That's what is called Ubuntu as well. And that is something that is the most advanced democratic, let me say, not say democracy. It is participative leadership that you can have. When you go back to your village, and I grew up in a village, my grandfather was the chief of our village, and I could still see that when decisions were supposed to be made, they would rally everyone in the village. You sit at the courtyard of the chief's palace, and you will debate and debate and debate. Everyone will be heard. It's not like today in the boardroom, they say the CEO, you should be the genius who has it all, and then you should lead the people. When you see their contest, the talent shows that they have, you have to eliminate people along the way, and then you have your winner. And you want the same people that you've eliminated along the way to embrace and celebrate the winner. That's not what it is. We have a different concept. Ubuntu and African palaver is not what the kind of marginalize it and make it feel like it's something. This is the concept of participation. This is where everyone's voice is heard. This is when we become part of a system and not workers or employees of someone. So we could talk and talk. I just want
Absolutely. No, it gets me very emotional also. It's just that here I try to make sure that the guest is the one talking, but this part actually get me very emotional. Because I remember one time I was saying, let's even try to, because let me use your word, let's try to deconstruct the idea that Europeans are discovering Africa. But you see now, Europeans are discovering Africa only a few hundreds of years ago. They are discovering the world actually, because they also said they discovered America. Now, this is my question to them, for somebody that is thinking. If you are discovering the world only a few hundreds of years ago, you are the one that need to explain to the world, where have you been? Because you cannot be
Exactly.
discovering something that you have been part of. You must explain, how are you discovering your world if you have been here? Because before the Africans have already navigated up to America. They have gone to China. So if you are just discovering that now, you are renaming the Great Lake as the Lake Victoria. You are renaming the river in Nigeria as River Niger. And you are just a boy that was born yesterday. You are the one saying you discover these people. Something must be wrong somewhere. Either you didn't know that these people exist, because we didn't have any. We don't. For example, I live in Verona. I have absolutely no reason to say I discover Verona. I have nothing to discover here. I just meet people. These are people. These are the people here. If anything, I meet people. I don't need to codify them. I don't need to change their way of life. It doesn't make any sense to me. If anything, maybe I can learn something from them. But the European, I didn't have this humility of saying that they learn from another people, even though they did. Because you see, some of the earlier Europeans that came to Africa, they're also the founder of European civilization, they will call it. You see, some of the earliest Europeans that actually came to Africa, they also became the father of Western civilization. These are the Greek. But we see the Greek now coming to Africa as students. They came to learn there. Some of them spent also 30, 40 years here. Some of the very earliest, you see, what I'm saying by that is that if Europeans were sort of humble enough, they will admit that they have come to also learn here, because we all go to some place to learn. Today, you can go to America to learn. It's normal for you to learn from some other persons. But they say, where they have come to learn, they are even the master of where they come to learn. After you learn from somebody, you say, I am your master.
That's inferiority complex. The European is very inferior. They suffer from massive inferiority complex, but they don't want to admit it. Because again, going back to history, ask yourself the question, why is it that they keep digging everything? The archaeologists are here digging everything in spite of what they've already taken out of the continent. They're still digging pieces and taking them out to store in their systems, so they can continue to destroy evidence of our civilization, evidence of our existence. And so the fact, and then they put the borders and the passport and the how do you call it, the barriers. There is no African student who can say, give me a visa, let me go to the UK and visit the museum to see the reminiscences of my civilization, of my ancestors, so that I can learn from it. You don't. And they don't bring it back to you. So they store it there. And so this is one way of acknowledging that these presences and this evidence was taken away by them. They did not just take people out of Africa. They took the evidences that documented African presence long before them. And again, if you say we are primitive, why are you here centuries upon centuries? I mean, invasion, colonization, neo-colonization, you're still here with your geopolitics, you have your military bases stationed here, and you still tell us that we're not good enough. So why don't you go if we're not good enough? Why do you stay here? So just assume and say, I need you. You have something that I want. So I need you. Can we collaborate? Can we partner? But because the European, the Caucasian by nature, is a very inferior kind of person, he resorts to aggressiveness, to violence. Just look at when they approach a black person on the street somewhere in Europe. It's not one police person that comes. It's a whole battalion, and they come armed. Even when you're not unarmed, even when you surrender, even when they put you down and knee on your shoulders, on your neck, they still come in masses. When they went to fetch Mandela, they encircled the whole village. When they came to capture our ancestors, they brought the gunpowder. So that is a sign of inferiority. That's a sign of weakness, disguised in aggressiveness, disguised in violence.
Thank you so much for
and
that.
We can have this conversation for a very long time.
Yeah. So what I wanted to just add there is you are right. You are right, no? Because this is more than 400-500 years. They are still here in Africa. Macron basically is so fixated on Africa. He couldn't find other this other African country that used to be their puppet. They are running away. I don't know how they managed to capture Nigeria, and they are not using Nigeria as a punching bag for their imperial mission. But the question is, they should have been satisfied by now. They should have been okay. Now, let's leave you people alone. Let's build our system. Now, talking of system, let's take a moment to reflect on that. Then, of course, we'll go into a different version of the story. Now, you see, the economic model that the West have built is not self-sufficient in that they don't build a system that they can survive by. Now, if Africa were strong enough today, all they just need to do to punish Europe is to tell Europe, be on your own, stay at home. The economy will crumble. Because where are you going to be able to, all these free resources that you are having, where are you going to be having them? I am thinking that if you're an intelligent person, look at your land, look at the resources that you have, look at your intellect, your people, everything, build an economy that depends on you, on your land, on your resources. He said, you see them building this technology, they need to go to Africa to get the resources. And for them to get the resources, they need to create war, all sorts of war that, of course, they are not directly fighting. But, of course, we understand that through the education, you can manipulate the people. And when the people are fighting, it appears as if the people are just fighting among themselves. No, they are fighting in response to how they have been configured. But why don't you develop a system that after 400 years, you don't need Africa anymore? If you are intelligent enough. That is the question. So it means, like you are saying, there is something that they are not able to figure out, which make them to, because they have the power, the military power, they can take it anywhere. But of course, just military power is not enough to be able to be a civilized country. Otherwise now, it will mean that we can justify the nearly 100 million people that were massacred in North America. Because I have the power, I can therefore kill all these people. What kind of civilization is that? And those who were massacred
in the Congo, not just North America, in the Congo. What Belgium, King Leopold did in the Congo.
What kind of civilization is that? That I can just kill them for what?
And then they turn around and tell us we're primitive.
All right.
One thing I like us to Africans to ask the question, where would we be today had a European not invaded us?
Of course, we have a different economy.
What conversation would we be having if we were not constantly fighting either to fit into the system, the programming that that has been forced upon us, or if we were not fighting to remember who we were, if everything was just equal, and Africans just had to ask yourself that question, where would we be? Now, someone who has been brainwashed using the church, religion, or using history will tell you Europeans brought civilization. And that's the conversation that's what they told us.
It's a lie.
If you go beyond the line, read Cheikh Anta Diop, read Professor Obenga, read what is his name? John Henry Clark, read what is his name? Van Settima. These are people who documented and who struggled and fought to re-establish that civilization started in Africa. When you read them and you ask yourself this question, you will see a shift, a massive shift. And you understand why things are the way they make things to be the way they are today. And why it is so important that we wake up and start remembering, not reinventing ourselves, but remembering who we were before they came and what they destroyed, what they took away from us, and the programming that they left us with.
Thank you so much for that, Ankwetta. Now, I want you to tell us a little bit, because now you are speaking from Saturday, but you have had experience here in Europe too. So that you are talking of the people that you know too. You are not talking of European because you read about them in the book. So tell us a bit about your journey. You have been here in Europe. What is your story?
Part of that story has massively shaped who I am, who is the woman, the African woman who is remembering now. So again, I went through a colonial system of education. I belong to the so-called Anglophone Cameroonians from the southwestern side of Cameroon. So I grew up being a marginalized person in my own country because they tell you Anglophone, you are minority. I went from there to the University of Yaoundé, which was mostly French speaking. So I had to learn French to be able to study in the white man system in my country. So I learned English, I learned French. And so at the age of 21, I got involved in the student movement in Cameroon. It was the first real student movement that we created to ask for improve study conditions at the University of Yaoundé. It was the only university in the country that we had. So there was over congestion, there were no real amenities. So we just asked for basic labs for science faculties, for the science faculty, libraries, and scholarship for students who were coming from far away, who came from families that were not very wealthy. And so I was amongst the 32 students who were kicked out of the university. And we were even lucky that we survived because a lot of us were killed on campus during that revolution in the 90s. And so somehow I found myself I volunteered in a women's rights organization. Through that organization, I was invited to a postgraduate course on human rights of women in Austria. I attended the course, returned back in Cameroon, and because I came back with a lot of ideas on how we can change a few things, my boss told me that you're not the boss here, so get out of my office. So I left her office, and eventually I found my way and went back to Austria because back then I found out that I could have access to a scholarship if I were in Europe. So this is again the system that is beating us, and we're running to them for whatever, for peanuts. So I found myself back in Europe and enrolled at the University of Vienna. I took 4 years there. I didn't finish the studies. I got bored. It wasn't what I was looking for. So I created a whole lot of organizations. I participated in creating the African community in Vienna. Created the first the Black women's community in Austria, which is still existing today. It was the first Black women's organization. I organized the first Black women congresses and summits in Vienna. In 2003, one of my fellow students from Mauritania was killed in the hands of the Austrian police, Sebane Wage. So this is when I went out of my way and I organized, we created programs, and okay, it's
Yeah.
like my phone is acting again. When we start being serious, the phone reacts. Okay, so I was saying that in 2003, this student colleague was killed by the Austrian police, and this is when we went out. And I was part of the people in the community that stood up. We organized demonstrations and activities, and we asked for justification, for accountability. And this led to me creating what became the Black women's community. So in that community, we created a lot of activities. The intention was to create a space where Black women can come together, where they can get to know one another, share their topics, but also create an organization that could allow us to create jobs for ourselves. Because as a Black person, it's not easy to get a job in Europe, not a job that reflects your qualification. It was a way of giving ourselves a voice and independence and a safe space. In 2007, I outgrew that organization and created the AFRA, International Center for Black Women's Perspectives. Now, the goal of this organization was to teach the European population to understand Black women. The Black women's community was to empower Black women in a safe space. And AFRA was now talking to the public. From there, we collaborated and created programs like Black Austria, which was an incredible, massive campaign to educate people on Black people. We call it the majority society, the white Austrian society, on Africans, and reposition ourselves. In 2007, I convened the first Black European Women's Congress, the first Black European Women's Congress, under massive protests and opposition from mainstream organizations like the European Women's Lobby and some other European institutions that had made themselves custodian of Black women, that thought that they were our babysitters. They have to mother us across Europe and tell us what is good for us. So what is happening to this? Let's just
Go on.
Okay, so we fought and we created that organization. Look, my brother, we had this space where we had 180 Black women from 18 European countries meet in one room in Vienna for 2 days. This was the moment when all my Austrian friends, I kicked them out of the room because we needed a safe space to just be us, to be vulnerable, to cry if we needed to, without having the feeling that someone was watching us, without having the feeling that we needed to justify why we were crying or that we would be judged or misunderstood. So I kicked my Austrian friends out. I said, if you're here to support me, get yourself out of this room. Some of them never talked to me until when I left Austria, they said I was racist. I said, if taking my space and protecting my sisters is being racist to you, then I am the biggest racist that you will ever see. So from there, I called the European Union. It was the year 2008. They just launched what they called Year for Intercultural Dialogue. I said, okay, if you mean what you're saying, then let's meet in your offices at the European Parliament. Let's talk about being immigrants in Europe from a Black woman's perspective. So we launched the Black European Women's Council at the European Union. In 2008, we had a massive agenda. And of course, it ended in what we know, that is that if you come up and you have that agenda and you challenge the system, they do the only thing that they know how to do, they cut the funding. So when funding is cut off, you can't continue the activity. This is what happened. And so I said, okay, you cut me off, that's no problem. I will still do, I will reinvent myself. So I created diversity leadership and consulting. I was the woman who brought diversity and inclusion to Europe. Yes, in 2010. The first World Diversity Leadership Summit was initiated by me, hosted in Vienna, and I hosted that summit from 2009 to 2012. And then they did the same thing again. When funding is no longer coming and you can get a sponsorship, this was no longer funding, it was sponsorship. And then companies, the sponsors start telling you, we sponsored these activities last year. What is it that you want again? You realize that you have outgrown your space. So I recognized that I had outgrown my space and it was time for me to pack up my things and go home. But I still resisted. In 2011, I was still telling my friends, I'm not going back to Africa. My children are born here. I'm going to stay here. They know me. I'll go to the mayor and get my honorable grave while I'm still alive. And so in 2014, I think my ancestors said, you're not getting it. We are getting them to cut all the funding so you can come back home. You're still not getting it. So we let everything crumble. So if you go on YouTube, you'll find my TED Talk, Shit Happens, Clean It Up and Move On. So I was invited to do a TED Talk, and it was a time when my life was crumbling down. I was living in denial. So on the morning of the TED Talk, I went on stage and I realized that my skirt was torn. And it was a reflection of what I was going through. So initially, I was supposed to talk about how to manage diversity from a Globuntu perspective, like learning from Mandela. But when I went on stage, I had to change my talk because I needed to, like something said, you have to tell the story of what is going on. So I told the story of how the shit was happening in my life. And when I finished that story, I knew that I had to walk through the shit, and excuse my language, but I call things the way they are. So I had to do the work, and part of doing the work was recognizing that I had outgrown my space and that I needed to come back home. So it took me 6 months to pack my 2 suitcases. I wrote a book, Follow Me to Africa, in an unspoken conversation with Nelson Mandela. And in that book, what I was literally doing was looking for an African that I could relate to, whose own shit was bigger than mine. When you are condemned for life and locked up for the rest of your life, you can't see your family. I still had a smartphone. I still had my social media platforms. I still had a roof over my head. I still had people that I could call on. So I said, so going through that conversation, I realized that I still had so much, but that what I had was no longer for Europe. I needed to go somewhere where I could where I could start all over, where I could heal the wounds that I have incurred from going through a colonial school system to navigating Europe and doing work across Europe and across America. I did a lot of work in America, did a lot of work across other European countries. So I incurred a lot of wounds. And one more thing that people didn't know about me, I was constantly being threatened while I was in Europe. I will receive a lot of threats, emails. People will say they'll gun me down. They send bombs in my office when I was in Vienna, and I was still living in denial. I was like, I'll fight you back. This is home. So I had to give up all of that and recognize that I had incurred a lot of wounds. I go back home and I heal. And when I heal, I can retell my story. Tell a story from a remembering perspective. Tell a story that uplifts others. Tell a story that gives me dignity, that gives me back my dignity, and that honors my ancestors, and build an architecture for the next generation so that they don't have to go through the things that I had to go through. So that they can tap into, they can grow in dignity, they can be themselves. I needed to do that for myself, for my children, and anyone else, any children that look like my children, that need that permission to step into their Africanness, to embrace it fully, and not wait until they are my age before they do it.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for claiming your space. It is very important. And I also like what you were talking about, the ancestors called you. And this is very important for us now and the work that we do here. I started this research a few years after I came to Italy, in Verona. It was just natural for me to ask the question, what are the other Africans here? What is the story about them? I didn't find what I was looking for, to be honest. Okay, in Verona, there are a lot of religious institutions and the rest of it, but the story they were telling didn't resonate with me. Until it did, they don't resonate with me. I am an African. You cannot tell my story for me. The way they tell their story is completely different from what is real for me. And as an African, you cannot invent me. You cannot, because I am not a computer-generated image. I am a human being. I have culture. I have history. Of course, I also have my flaws. Talking of an African. You cannot just simply paint one story and use it as that is the story of the whole of Africa. So what I did was to start talking to other Africans. Just start a camera in front of them, tell me your story. I did it a number of years. I produced 2 books from it. That is what led also to this podcast, where I say, okay, now we understand what is the story of Africans in Verona and in northern Italy. What about the other Africans that are living elsewhere in the world? I might not be able to travel to all the places, but can we use what we have today, which is technology? I use Zoom. I connect to people because now I already know how to talk to people in the sense of, I don't pick up my telephone. You are a professor in the university. I believe that you can contribute to the conversation. I just call you. I don't need anything. I don't need any gate. I just call you. If you are ready, fine. If you're not ready, it's okay. I don't have nothing to lose. So I started reaching out to different scholars from US, from UK, Canada, in China, everywhere. I've done more than 1,000 episodes here. And I'm just starting. So what I'm saying is that what I come to understand is that there is a desire among us to claim our space. We don't need to beg people, can you please add me to the conversation? No. We can hold the entire conversation. We can invite people to join us if they want. We don't need to belittle ourselves so that we can be accepted. You see, people say that your name might be difficult to pronounce, Ankwetta or Obehi. Why don't you just change it, abbreviate it? But why should we do that? If we can say Czechoslovakia, if we can mention names in Italy, why are you not able to mention Udo? Why are you not able to mention Chukuka? Why are you not able to mention names that are African? Because what many people do here in the West is that they pretend that they don't want to learn about you, but they want you to learn about them. They don't give their children your name, but they want you to give their name to your children. And they think that, oh, it is okay. They smile to you, but it's a pretense. They are just pretending. Anyway, I don't want to spend more time there because in the course of my work, I've learned to focus on the responsibility, my responsibility, on our responsibility as Africans, because I cannot change the European. I live in Europe, but I realize I cannot change them. In fact, I never have the intention to do that. In 2010, the book that I wrote, I already mentioned it before, on the development in Africa, My Hands Are Clean. It was entirely on what is my responsibility and what is happening to me. In 2015, I did a documentary that is titled Pan-Africanism, Testing Idea on Reality. It was the same. We are saying African brotherhood. We love ourselves. But why are we shooting ourselves in the back? Again, I'm saying the same thing. What is our responsibility? What can we do among ourselves to free ourselves? So that is what that is about. I'm really very heavy on the fact that we need to find where we are also wrong, where we can fix this situation, because nobody is coming to fix this shit for us. Nobody is coming. So the question, the point is that I would have just like us to focus on the return to Africa, because that is very heavy on what we do. It's very, very important that we talk about that, return to Africa. But you did maybe mention of some things that I think you will just need to expand on a little bit. You mentioned that they were threatening you, because many Africans in Europe need to understand that by the time you start standing out for yourself, the European demons will wake up for you. They will haunt you. You need to know that. You can't think that you are talking about systems that have sustained this oppression for years, that is going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. They kill us in Africa, they will kill us here. We know that. We are conscious of the fact that there is a price to pay. But we want to be free from this bondage. Therefore, we are ready for it. We are ready to make ourselves available for you. If you want to shoot, shoot. We see they do it in America all the time. So if we say we are African, for the fact that we say we are African, we are guilty. That is all we need to do to be guilty in the European mentality, in the European mind. All you need to do to be guilty is to be an African. They see you on the road, you are a target. Everybody is watching you, looking for how they can find fault in you. We know that. We are not children. But I want you to tell me a little bit about that, again, to reinforce the fact that is the reality. They are sending bomb to you. Are you a terrorist? They are hunting you down, sending email to you. What for? Tell us more about that.
It's the fact that you come into the system and the system tells you who you are. So it's like a place has been fixed for you. In Europe, they have what they call the integration program. So when you come to Europe, you are asked to integrate yourself into the system. And what you can be, the highest you can be is, if you're intellectual, is you can be an activist. So I got myself into that space because I refused to accept what the system was telling me. So they told me that means you're an activist. And so an activist means you do anti-racism. So it came to the point where the national TV will always call me at 10 o'clock to go comment when there was a case of anti-racism, when someone was being abused. A lot of Africans died in the hands of the police while I was in Austria. So I was always called upon to comment. So when you are called upon to comment, this is visibility. I was on the radio, I was on the newspaper, I was giving interviews, I was hosting events. So you expose yourself. And then the right-wing parties, the right-wing people in Austria, in Europe, across Europe. So you become the target. They tell you you're in our system, you're living in our country, you're using our resources, you're on our TV, you're on our radio, you should be grateful, you're asking for more, you've gotten more than any black person ever got here, and you're not satisfied. And by the way, I stood for parliamentary elections in Austria. Up until now, I'm the only African woman who ever did that. So those were all the reasons. Each time that I was on the radio, I knew that on my way home, I will receive an email the next day or something will be. It got to the point where I was invited to speak at the UN office in Geneva. And that invitation came through the Austrian embassy in Washington, D.C. So the Washington, D.C. office of the Austrian embassy informed the Ministry of Interior in Austria that I have to go to Geneva. And on that morning, I had to cancel my trip to Geneva because I received another threatening letter. And I had workers in my office. So I called the embassy and told them, I am not going to Geneva. I have to make sure that I take care of my workers, that people are not in danger when I'm gone. So that drew the attention. And the embassy became embarrassed. They had to tell Geneva the reason why I was no longer coming. And from that position, they had to call the Ministry of Interior, their ministry, all the way from the embassy in Washington, to give me protection. So I became as someone who was under protection of the Austrian Ministry of Interior. Each time that those letters come, you will see I'll call them, they will send their police, they will come with those amok dressed like, all their gears to come take away the letters from my office so I don't have to open them to get exposed. So had this not happened using diplomacy means, I had been abused or I have been insulted, nothing was happening. When I called the police, they will say, you're not wounded, you're not hurt. So there's no point in taking any action. Are you bleeding? No. So there's no point in taking action. But when I went through that diplomatic way of saying, I am not going to speak at the UN office in Geneva because this is happening, they had to take action. So from that moment, my children were protected. I never was in public with my children because I didn't want to expose them. And when I was traveling out of Austria, I had to inform the Austrian Minister of Minister of Interior, which informed the Minister of Foreign Affairs, because I was then a protected person. So this is where it becomes funny. When I moved to South Africa, I said, give me a break. I'm back on my continent. And before I left, the ministers, they called me, where are you going to? You're a protected person. Do you have a contract in South Africa? I said, you people, you leave me. I'm going back to where I come from. Leave me alone. You got me to the point where you had to start protecting me and that you're limiting my mobility. I'm going back home. So they still follow up. This is what is by you just being articulate, by you knowing you're right, by you standing up, it's enough for them to make you a target. But we don't have to be intimidated by that. We use the same system to make them address that. And let me tell you one last thing before we quit Austria. when I told them the Austrian journalists that I'm taking a sabbatical, if you call me, I will choose what I want to talk about. So if it is a case of racism, that's your system. You created that system in my absence. I came into it and I'm going to leave. I can't fix that system. So I'm burnt out and I don't want to be talking about your racism all the time. Fix your system. You know what this journalist told me? He said, I've been doing you a favor. It's your situation. It's your cause. So when we call you here, we're doing you a favor. And let me tell you, they will send a taxi to pick me up. They will send a taxi to bring me back. No one is paying me. But this journalist is being paid for the job. So when I told him all of this, he got so mad. He said, I'm ungrateful. I said, yes. If that is what you think it is, I am the most ungrateful person on earth. Are you happy now? But I'm not coming to your TV show anymore. I'm not coming to feed you so that you earn your salary while I continue to be looked upon as the problem. And I'm targeted. And my bills are waiting for me on the table. And you're not paying me from the salary that you're getting. Your taxi drivers are getting paid.
Thank you so much for that, sister. You see, it's the same everywhere. It's the same everywhere. So there was a time, I think it's only recently that I started to talk on the issue of racism. Because I felt it wasn't my duty to educate the European about racism.
It is not ours.
It is your duty to understand what you are doing. Okay. I cannot teach you. Okay, now this is what is happening within this argument, is that they intentionally come to hurt you and they say, let's put you in front of the camera, explain to me how you feel. You are experimenting on my emotion. You should know how it feels. Hurt yourself if you want to know. I am not an expert on racism. In fact, I was saying at the point, I think it is better to accuse somebody of a crime, because when you go to the court, you will be able to be persecuted for the crime. Because in racism, I don't know if there is any court in Europe that is going to condemn Europeans for being racist. Because now, this is how they coin it. Racism. Racist. Because when you are a racist, it appears that you are protecting your people against other people, whether you are going to the extreme. If you are protecting your people need to protect you too. So why should I be the one exposing you that is protecting your people? Now, that is what you want me to become an expert of, as the one who is telling you that you are wrong for protecting your people. Because that is what the Ku Klux Klan did, using the Bible and everything to say they are protecting the white people. Now,
It's
you
the
want,
same that Trump is doing with his administration.
of
They're putting the
course,
cross and saying they're Christians and they're persecuting
hypocrites,
and deporting people all the time. If that
hypocrites.
is the Christ, then Africans should learn that that Christ is not for us. That church is not for us. That's it.
It's hypocrisy. So I don't think Africa should really become expert in racism. Let Europeans become the expert in racism. Let's all become expert of our history. We will tell you who we are. Now, in terms of racism, we must look for a way maybe to frame that. If you look at somebody and you slap him, you are not a racist, you are a criminal. Because in the criminal code, we will find a way to prosecute you. But if I say you are a racist, well, you don't really go to a prison for that. Because you are, in the way of how it is framed, you want to protect your race. So why should I shouldn't be an expert in that. I shouldn't be an expert in that. Anyway, that is for that. And that is very important. I like the way you handle that, journalists. Because they need to understand that they should become the expert in racism. They should explain it. Not me. I am not expert in that. Now, tell me about the preparation to go to Africa. That is an important conversation to have.
That one, there was no preparation. There was no preparation at all. It was just a decision, and a decision that got executed immediately. I had been to South Africa in 1999, and for some reason, I loved the country. It was just shortly after apartheid, 1994, 1999. Yes, it was shortly after that, and I knew that I would go back to that country, but I wasn't sure when. Wasn't 1990? No, 99. Yes, they had independence in 1994. Yeah, correct. So I knew I would go back there, but I did not know under what conditions and when. So when stuff happened and I knew that I had to, when I went into that conversation with Mandela, it was an imaginary conversation. I wrote a whole book. It's 332 pages. It's just a conversation with Nelson Mandela. And that one is a topic, how that conversation went it's a whole dynamic of its own.
We'll come back for it another time because we are not in haste. Definitely.
When South Africans read that book, some of them they just laughed. Some of them were like, look at the way she's talking to Madiba. Some of them like, you never met him. How do you know all these things? I had to study that guy. And again, I didn't like Mandela because of his divorce with Winnie Mandela. And I'll tell you about that in another conversation. So in preparing, I just knew that I want to go to a country where my children, maybe there's something about me that I have to tell you. My children's dad is Austrian. So growing up in Austria, my children see Africans, the image of Africans on the posters everywhere on the street are pictures of misery, the poverty and all the kinds of things. So originally, I wanted to take my kids with me, and I wanted them to I wanted to take them to a country. So number one, I could not go back to Cameroon. I didn't have land.
That is important.
I didn't have a car. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have a home. I had nothing to fall back on in Cameroon. And I knew going back to Cameroon was going to make me a liability for my family and a shame and a disgrace. And it was going to make them focus on me as if I was a failure. And I knew I was not a failure. I was becoming. I knew what I had done in Europe. Yes, it didn't give me the money to do the things that they thought I should be doing. But the fact that I didn't have all of those assets didn't mean that I was a failure. But I knew that none of them would understand 20 years in Europe and you don't have all of that. There's some people who go for 5 years and then they've built houses and all of that. That was not my mission. I didn't do it. So I had to find a place where I could be anonymous, have my peace of mind, where I could regroup myself, recalibrate, re-strategize, redefine myself. An environment that will accept me without judging me, and because they don't know me. Where I could go barefoot, even if I'm hungry, where I don't have anything to eat, no one will say you were in Europe. Look at her. So I needed that kind of environment. And the second thing was I needed an environment where my children could see someone like their mom and their dad in public life. No more pictures. I know this was apartheid South Africa, but that was the environment that could offer Black people in office and next to white people without that kind of decadence that they were used to in Europe. So it turned out I could not take my kids. Someone offered me a work contract. That one, again, when we talk about the book, I'll tell you about that work contract. I went to South Africa a couple of times. We prepared everything. It was the first time that I was going to work for someone. But I needed to take that contract because it will give me the permit and the revenue to take my kids with me, because I had no money to go back home. I had no money. So what happened is that guy, when I visited him, we did everything, worked on it. I had connections. So when I went to South Africa, Miss America followed me. She's my sister friend, and I met her in Florida, and we just love each other. She looked up to me. She said, I want to go to the continent, and her mother said, if she ever has to go to the continent, it will be with you. So when I called her and said I was going to South Africa, she said, not without me, I'm coming. So she bought her ticket and met me in South Africa. So this is me in South Africa coming with Miss America. And everyone was looking up like, who? She comes with me, Miss America. She must be like a celebrity herself. So Indian South African looked up to me. They just opened like one particular Indian South African. She thought like, I will get her. So she promised me, I'll get you a place and all the kinds of things. And then this guy who was giving me a job was an Austrian who became South African.
What a story.
So we were saying like, okay, this is me, Austrian African, in South Africa, working with a South African Austrian. And so he was selling solar lamps. So Miss America and we were going to launch a campaign where we bring the solar lamps to all the girls in Africa so they can learn, where there's no electricity. So this guy loved my concept because I was coming with Miss America. Somewhere along the line, he decided to change his mind after I had gone back to Austria and taken my children out of school and gave away everything that I needed because I knew I was going to get a job contract and I was going to. And so he canceled the contract 3 months before I could travel. So I called my kids' dad. We had been separated since 2009. I said, okay, look, we agreed that I'll take the kids with me. Things have changed. I'll have to leave them with you. So once I settle, I will come for them. He said, okay, fine. So I'm glad that my kid dad and we have a very good parenting relationship, very good friendship. So he said, okay, leave them with me and go do whatever it is. When you're ready, you can come get them. So I had to talk to the kid because first I had convinced the kid that we're going to Africa. And in my book, you'll find chapter that will make you laugh. The conversations that I had with my daughter, the one that I had with my son, and the things that I had to, we had to go through for them to say they're coming with me. And then I had to go back and tell them we're not going together. So that was another chapter. So eventually I had to leave them there and I moved to South Africa. Looking back today, I'm glad I didn't take the kids with me because it was rough in South Africa. So the book that I wrote in an unspoken conversation with Nelson Mandela, Follow Me to Africa. I was lucky that I sold some copies of those books. I sold like 300 copies. So I had the money that allowed me to buy an air ticket and I had 2,800 euros left in my pocket and I had a suitcase full of those books. It was the asset that I was taking with me. At the airport, they told me I had to pay additional 500 euros or I dump the books. I said, I'm not dumping any one of my books. So I paid 500. I was left with 2,300 euros. That is what I moved to South Africa with. But with a determination, I'm going to pursue my African dream in South Africa, cost what may. I am not going to return to Europe. I'll go to visit my children. And I didn't have a permanent visa. I had a European passport that allowed me to stay for 3 months. So every 3 months, I was going back and forth. I had to leave the country. And I had some lecturing jobs in Austria. So that allowed me to pay the ticket, go lecture. The little money that I had allowed me to pay the ticket and come back and until the next 3 months. So at some point, the ancestors said again, you have to be here. So out of the blue, my lecturing contracts were canceled. So I had to focus in South Africa. I started writing books. And luckily, my books were approved by the Department of Education. It was a miracle. I said it was the ancestral making again. I didn't qualify for those books to be approved. They were looking for young South African authors. I was not young. I was not a South African. I was on a visiting visa, but they chose my books. So that gave me a revenue. My books are going to school. It means that what I was learning for my own good. And maybe let me tell you this: the reason why I wrote books, I took my children, my daughter in kindergarten in Austria, and this little Austrian girl, comes to me and says, "I'm happy for you people, brown people, that you came to our country. Otherwise, you'll be living on trees in Africa and starving because there's no food in Africa." She was 3 years old. This was me. I was in my 40s. In my 40s? Yeah, early 40s. And I didn't know what to say to her. So she probably thought like she was right. So she said, yes, okay, what does Africa even contribute to the world? Okay. Problems and misery. And she's 3 years old with all the audacity. And I was just like, where's this coming from? I couldn't answer. But that accompanied me for the years that I was in Austria, that I stayed in Austria. So when I left, I had promised my children I will write books to explain Africa to the Austrian so that they don't keep asking those stupid questions, because I got asked a lot of stupid questions. You will know that as well, you living in Verona. So I promised.
And when I told you that when I got to Verona, I was looking for stories of Africa to read, and I didn't find it, that is what it meant. Because people in Verona have also the same feeling. That is basically what the European missionary brought back as a message, because that story was important for them to justify whatever that was going to happen. Yeah. They needed to take away the humanity in Africa. This is done by European missionary. And of course, they were and still working with the European government. They are the same. Yeah. The military, the police, the missionaries, the NGO, the media, the government, they are all industry. One are the same. Yeah. So that is, okay, continue.
Yeah. So when I returned to South Africa, my kids visited me, and the first year, that was 2016, and my daughter said, "Mom, you have no excuse now. Write those books. You have to write those books." So the ideas that I returned with in South Africa, none of them worked. So I had to go down on my knees. You see, sometimes when we return, we think we've been in Europe, we know it all, so we're coming to fix Africa. We forget that we need to embrace Africa first. We need to drop everything that we learned in Europe. And then we ask Africa, ask the ancestors, I'm here. What is it that I need to learn that I did not know, or that I had? What is it that I need to unlearn from what I was taught? And even that arrogance of thinking that I know it all because I've been to Europe. So what is it that I need to unlearn in order for me to be prepared for the continent to show me my place at the table and give me the voice to do what I'm expected to do that will add value, that will first of all reposition me, give me a better understanding of my Africanness, my continent, my history, my culture, my identity, so that I can then use that to re-educate myself, my children, and other Africans who are ready to be re-educated. So when I went to the point where I had to dump everything, all the ideas that I brought, and then go down on my knees and said, okay, here I am, Africa. What is it that I need to heal? What is it that I need to forget? What is it that I need to release? What is it that I need to unlearn? And what pathway should I take in order to channel all that I have, this energy and the healing that I'm doing? How do I need to channel it? And so it all came down to the idea of books. That's when I started writing those books. And I guess that's the reason why it was approved in the last moment by the Department of Education. And when the books went to school, they were being read by, the series is called Africa for Smart Kids. So when they were read by, they were taken to 2,500 schools in Gauteng. I realized that, so the department, I was told that every year they will ask me to submit new books. And I said, this is not my journey alone. I have to use this power that I just got given, this platform, to groom young African writers. So I rallied children of my friend in South Africa, and I said, come, I'll teach you how to write books. So I started coaching kids. I created holiday master classes. The idea was to groom young authors. And before the pandemic came, in the first year that I did, we graduated 15 young authors. And my biggest pride is that all these kids' books were approved for schools. These kids went along to win prizes. These kids' books are in libraries. Some of them, when you see them, they've all excelled. And they had stories that were, some of them were really sad stories. Bullying at school and not knowing their Africanness and all of that. I see parents of these kids have become my authors as well. All of them, many of them have written books. So they call themselves, first they used to call themselves, introduce themselves, I'm the mom of a Globuntu young author. Now they call themselves, I'm a Globuntu mom author. And I'm a Globuntu dad author. So when I see how these people have excelled, how they have embraced themselves, and how they have healed through just me healing myself and using that platform to bring more of them in, it just justifies why I had to come back. That alone is the price that it's a non-monetary price. It's a priceless price. It's a priceless recognition.
I'm happy for you, sister. I am happy
And
for
so
you.
I moved to Sao Tome, and what I'm doing now is another level of healing, which is very deep. You will know that Sao Tome is the place where the concept of the systematic enslavement of Africans was institutionalized. So this is a space where we have to do some ancestral healing, ancestral acknowledgement, where we have to do shadow work, where we have to do trauma healing, and a lot more. So I've been here for 3.5 years, and the level of healing that I've gone through is just so massive. It's the deeper layer. And the books that I'm writing from here are no longer history books. They're healing tools. They're healing tools. And I hope we can touch on that another time. And
Absolutely.
the one that I'm working on right now, it may shock you, but looking at menopause from an African perspective. Why are women going through menopause? What are the symptoms? How do we understand that from a sacred place, place of understanding? How do we communicate that to children, but also to our brothers, to our sons, to our partners, so that they understand and honor the journey, that our aging process from a healing perspective, not from biology, not from textbook, not from intellect, but from a very organic, hands-on, ancestral, and sacred place of understanding.
You must be working with a very good friend of mine, actually a mother of mine. That is how I will call her. I call her Egbomi. She's a Nigerian ancestral healing coach in the UK, who is very
Oh, is it
passionate.
Gloria?
Yeah,
Is
Gloria
it Sister
Tino.
Gloria?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yes, we're working.
Because this is her word. This is her word. And I
Yeah.
and I tell her often time that you need to understand that the work that you are doing is a call. You are responding to your call. Because we
Yeah.
need this, we need a lot of it. Because we have been so much bastardized in Africa, to the point that we have become confused. But the confusion is intentional. Because when we are confused like this, we become easy to be managed, to be put in separate boxes, as products. We become product for people. But now
Yeah.
we need to be able to remember. Sister Gloria has one of the programs that she called Remembering. That is interesting. So thank you so much for the work that you are doing. This is very important. Like I said, we could really go on and on this conversation, but this is what we are going to do. We'll come back again on another occasion. But now, for the people that are listening, same always on this question of return. Tell me, what has it taught you? Because now you're not telling me you are packing your bag and baggages, you want to return to Europe, right? So you must have learned a very important lesson that is making you to stay in your home. Tell me more about that.
The biggest lesson is that I'm African and home is home. And that every place in the world has its own challenges. And I can better face the challenges that the continent face from the continent, not from abroad. And in order to do that, I have to be present. I have to be here. I have also learned that Africa is big. We are talking about 55 countries, sovereign countries, if we include Western Sahara. So if one country is not, or if one country becomes not conducive for me, I look for the next. There's nothing like going back to Europe.
Oh, thank you
As
so
South
much.
Africa was becoming a little bit unconducive, I'm in Sao Tome. And if Sao Tome turns out to be that, I already have the next country that I will go to. We need to understand our continent. We need to give ourselves the permission to be African. And being African doesn't mean that we define ourselves as Nigerian, that we define ourselves as Cameroonians. I'm an African born in Cameroon. So I own all of Africa. It's a vast place to be in. It's an incredible, resourceful place. And being here is honoring my ancestors. It is allowing the next generation to know that it is the rightful place to be. It's not just okay, it is the rightful place to be. And that greener pastures are here. The past, Africa is the cradle of humankind. Africa is the future of humankind. While we are leaving the continent seeking greener pastures and risking our lives outside and being exposed to massive racism and every other thing that comes there, and the danger of being killed on the street by the European police or the Western police, they are moving in again. They are moving in. The Chinese are taking over. They're buying land. They're settling. They're owning property. And so we are chasing. By the time that we come back home, we become strangers at home. So it is the time to come back home is now. Not to come back home because home is easy. Nothing is easy. Settling in Europe is not easy. So settling back in the continent is not going to be easy. But if we put in the effort to settle abroad, we can as well put in the effort to settle home and claim home. And claiming that home is a responsibility. It's a responsibility we all must assume. It's what determines how the future will look like. Should Africa become, Africa is already feeding Europe with her resources. Should we allow them to settle here, just like they did in South Africa, where they're now trying to take part of South Africa, certain areas in South Africa, and make them white-only zones on our continent, when no amount of staying in Europe will let you own land in Europe. Tell me how many African people own land in Europe. Tell me how many African people can say that they're European without someone telling them that you're European only on paper. So the decision to come back home and to stay home and to make home work for us should be a responsibility. It should be a moral duty. It should be something that we should consider and understand that it is not a light thing. It is not an easy thing to do. It's not a quick fix. It's something that we work on as long as we live. We find solutions every day, and we can find them when we determine, when we make up our minds to find the solutions and to work from home and to be home and to embrace our Africanness.
Thank you, sister. This is the medicine that we must drink. This is the medicine we must drink. There is no argument against it. And it is possible. If it is possible for us to endure this, so if I take you around on the cities of Europe, which of course you have been here, you see how many Africans have become waste here. Of course, it is true that maybe when you look at the statistics, you might see maybe 1 person or 2 persons who are able to do some things. I don't even want to go into the detail. Maybe they build big mansions and all of that. But that is a fraction. That is less than 0.0% of the Africans that are here. In Italy alone, we have nearly 100,000 Nigerians, only Nigerians in Italy. You can go on to other places. The prison is full of these people from Africa. I don't know of Europeans that are in African prisons. It doesn't mean they don't commit crime. It doesn't mean they don't commit crime.
And let me tell you something. In my village, there is no prison. I don't think there's a prison in your village. We never had systems of prisons in our culture, because prisons are a European invention to capture let's not go there. Let's keep that away. We'll talk about that sometimes. I just want to say prisons is not part of our culture. And we sort out our issues until we can connect with one another, until we reconcile with one another. So people who are out there, we just have to understand, again, that the moral responsibility of coming home, it doesn't matter what it takes. Sometimes you don't need to think, you don't need to prepare. You just have to execute and trust that it will happen, that you'll find your way home, and let it be. When you come with the thing that I'm not yet prepared, I'll go check and then I'll go back, I'll go check and I'll go back, you end up not being anywhere. And the number of Africans who are out there who end up in OH homes, elderly Africans are not meant to be in OH homes. Elderly Africans are educators in our culture. So when you put them in OH there where they rot and they deteriorate and they become depressive, you take that knowledge away from the people. And those people can be needed here. So don't wait until you're too old and too frail to come back home. Come back when you still have the energy to start all over. When you still have the energy to move around, if you have to move around, to find a place that feels like home for you.
Thank you so much for that. There is nothing more to add to that. And I want to say thank you also to those that have listened to the end of this conversation. We'll say, share your thoughts. Let us know what you think about this conversation. Because with Ankwetta, we are definitely promising you we are coming back again to this conversation. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure here.